The blistering Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Abigail Sullivan clutched her small valise in one hand and pressed the other protectively against her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant and utterly alone, she stood at the dusty edge of Camp Verde, Arizona Territory, 1883, her shadow stretching long across the hard, packed earth. The journey from Missouri had depleted nearly all her resources, but desperation drove her forward. She had come too far to turn back now. The township of Camp Verde wasn't much to look at, a collection of wooden structures strung along a wide dirt road, the occasional hitching post populated with tired-looking horses. But rumors of work had drawn her here, whispers of ranches needing hands even as winter approached. She needed a position, and quickly. Her child would not wait for fortune to find them. As Abigail made her way toward the general store to inquire about work opportunities, she noticed a handwritten notice tacked to the community board outside. Ranch hand needed at Oakley Ranch, 5 miles west of town. Inquire at premises. The storekeeper, a round man with kind eyes, noticed her interest in the posting. "You ain't thinking of applying out at Oakley's, are you, miss?" "I am in need of work, sir," Abigail replied, straightening her shoulders despite her fatigue. The man's eyes dropped briefly to her condition before meeting her gaze again. "That's Declan Oakley's spread. Good man, fair employer, but he's looking for someone to help with cattle and repairs. Hard work for a man, let alone a—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at her midsection. "I am stronger than I appear," she said firmly, "and desperate circumstances call for desperate measures." The storekeeper sighed. "Road heads west out of town. Can't miss the archway with Oakley Ranch burned into the beam. But miss," he added as she turned to leave, "don't get your hopes up. Oakley's particular about who he hires." Abigail nodded her thanks and purchased a small portion of jerky with her dwindling funds. She would rest in the shade and then make her way to the ranch before nightfall. The 5 miles stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. Abigail paused frequently, sipping sparingly from her canteen, her free hand cradling the life within her. As the sun began its descent, she spotted the wooden archway the storekeeper had mentioned. Relief washed over her, quickly replaced by apprehension. What if this Declan Oakley turned her away immediately? Where would she go then? The ranch house came into view as she passed under the arch, a substantial 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, she could make out a corral with horses milling about. The place spoke of prosperity but not extravagance. As Abigail approached the house, a tall figure emerged from the barn, leading a chestnut mare. The man paused when he noticed her, then secured the horse to a post before walking in her direction. He moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to hard work and his own authority. "Can I help you, madam?" he called out, pushing back his hat to reveal a weathered face framed by dark brown hair. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, moved from her face to her condition and back again, his expression carefully neutral. "Are you Mr. Oakley?" Abigail asked, willing her voice to remain steady. "Declan Oakley, yes," he confirmed, stopping a respectful distance from her. "What brings you out this way? It's a fair walk from town." "I've come about the position," she said, gesturing vaguely in the direction of town. "The notice in Camp Verde. I'm looking for work." Surprise flickered across his features, followed by something that might have been respect. "The ranch hand position. Madam, I don't mean any disrespect, but that job involves breaking horses, mending fences, and driving cattle. Given your current state, I don't see how that would be possible." "Mr. Oakley," Abigail began, drawing herself up to her full height, which still left her nearly a foot shorter than him, "I am stronger than I look. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I can cook, clean, mend, tend to animals, garden, whatever is needed. I learn quickly and work hard. I need this job, sir." Declan studied her for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Abigail Sullivan." "And your husband?" She swallowed hard. "There is no husband, Mr. Oakley." To his credit, his expression didn't change. "I see. And when is your child due?" 3 months, give or take." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, considering. "Miss Sullivan, the work I advertised for requires physical strength I don't believe you possess, especially in your condition. I couldn't in good conscience hire you for such tasks." Abigail felt the last of her hope slipping away. She blinked rapidly against the burning in her eyes. "I understand. Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, wondering how far she could make it before nightfall. "Miss Sullivan," Declan called after her. "I didn't say I wouldn't offer you employment." She turned back, confusion and the barest flicker of hope crossing her features. "My housekeeper left 2 weeks ago to care for her ailing mother in Prescott." "Place has gone to hell since then," he said with a wry smile. "I could use someone to cook, clean, and keep things in order. The position includes room and board, of course." Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "I would be most grateful for such an opportunity, Mr. Oakley. There's a room off the kitchen that was the housekeeper's. It's small but private. You can stay there until—" He gestured at her belly. "After the baby comes, we'll reassess the situation. Thank you, Mr. Oakley." "I won't disappoint you." "We'll see," he said, not unkindly. "Now it's getting late. Let me show you where you'll be staying, and we can discuss terms in the morning when you've had some rest." As Abigail followed Declan Oakley toward the house, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Perhaps here, in this dusty corner of the Arizona Territory, she and her child might find sanctuary after all. The room was indeed small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window that looked out onto a vegetable garden in need of attention. A washstand stood in one corner with a pitcher and bowl. "It's not much," Declan said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "It's perfect," Abigail replied truthfully, setting her valise on the bed. After weeks of travel, sleeping in crowded stage coaches and questionable boarding houses when she could afford them, this modest room seemed like a palace. "Kitchen's through there," he said, gesturing to a door. "Help yourself to whatever you need. I usually take breakfast at sunrise. We can talk more then." He hesitated, then added, "Welcome to Oakley Ranch, Miss Sullivan." After he left, Abigail sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on her belly, tears of relief silently streaming down her face. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, the future didn't look entirely bleak. The next morning, Abigail rose before dawn, determined to prove her worth immediately. She found the kitchen well-stocked but disorganized, evidence of a man living alone without domestic help. By the time the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, she had coffee brewing, biscuits in the oven, and bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet. Declan entered the kitchen just as she was setting the table, his surprise evident. "You didn't have to start so soon, Miss Sullivan." "I wanted to," she replied simply, pouring him a cup of coffee. He sat at the table, watching as she moved about the kitchen with surprising grace despite her condition. "You mentioned you grew up on a farm." "Yes, in Missouri. My parents had a small homestead near Springfield. I learned to run a household early. My mother wasn't well. And they're no longer living." Abigail set a plate before him. "No, father died in '78 from pneumonia. Mother followed a year later. My brother took over the farm, but when he married, there wasn't room for me anymore." Declan nodded, understanding the unspoken dynamics. A brother's new wife wouldn't want an unmarried sister as part of the household. "And the father of your child," Abigail stiffened slightly. "A mistake I don't care to discuss, Mr. Oakley." He accepted this with a nod and took a bite of the biscuits. "These are good, best I've had in a while, thank you." She hesitated before sitting across from him, her own plate modestly filled. "About the terms of my employment." "Right." Declan set down his fork. "Room and board, as I mentioned, plus $20 a month. It's what I paid Mrs. Holloway, the previous housekeeper." Abigail nearly choked on her coffee. $20 a month plus room and board was far more generous than she had dared hope. "That's more than fair, Mr. Oakley. Your duties would include cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general upkeep of the house. The garden out back needs attention if you're up to it. I've got a ranch hand, Miguel, who helps with the heavy work around the property, but he's no cook." "I can manage all of that," Abigail assured him. "And I'd be happy to tend to the garden. I noticed it needs some care." Declan studied her for a moment. "What about after the baby comes? Have you thought that far ahead?" It was the question that had kept her awake at night for months. "I'll work up until the time comes, and after. I hope to be back on my feet quickly. The baby can stay with me while I work." She met his gaze directly. "I don't expect charity, Mr. Oakley. I intend to earn my keep." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let's give this arrangement a trial run of 2 weeks. If we're both satisfied, we'll continue. That seems fair." Declan finished his breakfast and stood. "I'll be out with the cattle most of the day. Miguel's bringing supplies from town later. If you need anything, he can help." He paused at the door. "Don't overdo it, Miss Sullivan. The house has been a mess for weeks. It can wait another day or two if necessary." After he left, Abigail allowed herself a small smile. The job was temporary, contingent on her performance and Declan's satisfaction, but it was a start. A place to have her baby safely. Time to figure out what came next. The days quickly fell into a routine. Abigail rose early to prepare breakfast, then spent her days bringing order back to the ranch house. Declan was out most days working the land or tending to his cattle, but they would share meals together, their conversation gradually becoming less formal and more comfortable. She learned that Declan had inherited the ranch 5 years earlier when his father died. He'd been running it alone with the help of Miguel Rodriguez, a young man from a neighboring ranch who worked for Declan part-time. The ranch was modest by Arizona standards, 100 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and enough land to sustain them. Declan had ambitions to expand but was cautious about taking on debt. For his part, Declan observed Abigail with growing admiration. Despite her advanced pregnancy, she worked tirelessly, transforming his bachelor quarters into a proper home. The kitchen gleamed. Meals appeared like clockwork, and even the neglected garden began to show signs of revival under her care. A week into her employment, Abigail was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw a man on horseback who was definitely not Declan. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, expensively dressed and regarding her with undisguised curiosity. "Good morning," he called, dismounting with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. "Is Oakley about?" "Mr. Oakley is checking the north pasture," Abigail replied, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "He should return for midday dinner. May I tell him who called?" The man approached, his gaze traveling from her face to her condition and back again, his expression speculative. "Lawrence Blackburn. I own the Double B neighboring property to the east." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And you are?" "Abigail Sullivan. I'm Mr. Oakley's housekeeper." "Is that what they are calling it these days?" Blackburn said with a smirk. Abigail's cheeks burned, but she held his gaze steadily. "That is my position, yes. Forgive me, Miss Sullivan," he said, not sounding particularly contrite. "It's just unusual to see a woman in your condition employed in such a capacity." "My condition doesn't affect my ability to maintain a household, Mr. Blackburn." "Of course not." He glanced around the property. "Tell Oakley I stopped by. I'm interested in discussing the water rights for Cottonwood Creek. It seems we have a disagreement about the boundary line." His eyes hardened slightly. Best to resolve it amicably between neighbors. When Abigail relayed the message to Declan at midday, his expression darkened. "Blackburn's been trying to move the boundary markers for years. His ranch is 10 times the size of mine, but he's always looking to expand." "He seemed unpleasant," Abigail ventured. Declan snorted. "That's being kind. Lawrence Blackburn is what happens when too much money meets too little character. He's been trying to buy me out since my father died." He shook his head. "I'll ride over tomorrow, see what he's claiming now." That evening, as Abigail was preparing supper, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the edge of the table until it passed. False labor, she told herself. It was too early for the baby to come. But the incident left her shaken, a reminder of how precarious her situation remained. Declan noticed her pallor at dinner. "Are you unwell, Miss Sullivan?" "Just tired," she assured him. "And please call me Abigail. Miss Sullivan makes me feel like a schoolteacher." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his serious features. "Abigail, then, and I'm Declan, at least when we're not in company." "There isn't much company to worry about out here," she observed. "No," he agreed, "just how I like it." The following week brought changes to their routine. A sudden autumn storm swept through the valley, bringing much-needed rain but also flooding the lower pastures. Declan and Miguel worked from dawn until well after dusk, moving cattle to higher ground and reinforcing the damaged fencing. On the third night of the storm, Declan returned later than usual, soaked to the skin and exhausted. Abigail had kept dinner warm and hurried to pour him a cup of coffee laced with a splash of whiskey. "You should change before you catch your death," she admonished, setting the steaming cup before him. "Yes, madam," he said with a tired smile, too exhausted to resist her mothering. When he returned in dry clothes, she had a plate of stew waiting. "You didn't have to wait up," he said between grateful bites. "I wanted to make sure you ate something warm," she replied simply. "How bad is the damage? Could have been worse. Lost some fencing along the creek, but the cattle are safe." "Miguel's staying in the bunkhouse tonight, too dangerous for him to ride home in this weather." Abigail nodded, pleased the young man wouldn't attempt the treacherous journey to his family's small homestead a few miles away. "There's plenty of stew if he's hungry." Declan studied her across the table. "You're good at this, you know, taking care of people." She flushed slightly at the compliment. "It's what I was raised to do. Still, not everyone would be so considerate." He hesitated, then asked, "Have you thought about what happens after the baby comes?" "The 2 weeks we agreed on have long passed." Abigail's heart skipped. She had been avoiding this conversation, knowing her position was tenuous at best. "I have some savings," she said carefully. "Not much, but perhaps enough to get us to California. I have a cousin there who might help." "And if that doesn't work out," she met his gaze steadily, "then I'll find something else. I always do." Declan was silent for a long moment. "What if you stayed here? As your housekeeper, you mean?" She tried to keep the hope from her voice. "With a baby?" "As my partner," he said, the words seeming to surprise even him. Abigail stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Your partner? I don't understand." Declan pushed his empty plate away, looking suddenly uncomfortable but determined. "I've been thinking about this for a few days now. This ranch needs more than just my hands to make it grow. I need someone I can trust, someone with a stake in its success." "And you think that person is me?" A woman you've known less than a month, an unwed mother with no prospects. I think you're someone who works hard, doesn't complain, and has good sense, he countered. The rest doesn't matter much to me. What exactly are you proposing? Abigail asked carefully. Declan took a deep breath. A business arrangement. You stay on, not as a housekeeper but as a partner in the ranch. We split the profits, make decisions together. Your child would have a home, security. He rushed on before she could speak. It's not charity, Abigail. The place runs better with you here. You've already improved things. Imagine what we could build together. She stared at him, speechless. It was more than she could have hoped for, a solution to all her immediate problems, and yet, people would talk. They'd assume. Let them, Declan said firmly. I don't much care what people in town think. Why would you do this? You barely know me. His expression softened. I know enough. I know you're alone and facing an uncertain future. I know I've been alone too long trying to run this place by myself. He met her gaze directly. And I know that having you here these past weeks has made this house feel like a home for the first time since my mother died. Tears pricked at Abigail's eyes and she blinked them away. It's a generous offer, Declan, but I need time to think about it. It's not a decision to make lightly. Of course, he agreed, rising from the table. Take all the time you need, the offer stands. That night, Abigail lay awake long after the storm subsided, her hand resting on her swollen belly as the baby moved within her. A partnership, security for her child, a home. It was everything she had been praying for, and yet the pragmatic part of her wondered what Declan truly wanted in return. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the storm having washed the world clean. Declan left early to assess the damage in daylight, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts. She had nearly made up her mind to accept his offer when the sound of approaching horses drew her to the front window. Lawrence Blackburn had returned, this time with 2 men flanking him. Something in their posture set Abigail on edge. She watched as they dismounted and approached the house, Blackburn's stride purposeful, his expression grim. She opened the door before they reached it, standing firmly in the threshold. Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Oakley isn't here at present. That's convenient, Blackburn replied, his tone clipped. Perhaps you'd be so kind as to tell me where he's moved my boundary markers. Abigail frowned. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. The survey stakes marking the property line along Cottonwood Creek, Blackburn clarified, his patience visibly thinning. They've been moved. My foreman discovered it this morning. Mr. Oakley has been dealing with flooding from the storm, Abigail said evenly. He hasn't had time to tamper with your property markers. Blackburn's eyes narrowed. You're awfully defensive of a man who's merely your employer. I defend what's right, Mr. Blackburn, and accusing someone without proof isn't right. One of Blackburn's men shifted impatiently. Boss, we could just ride the property line ourselves, set the stakes where they belong. You will do no such thing, Abigail said firmly. This is Oakley land, and you have no right to alter anything on it without Mr. Oakley's permission. Blackburn stepped closer, his voice lowering. Listen carefully, Miss Sullivan. That creek provides water for my cattle. I've allowed Oakley to share it out of neighborly courtesy, but my patience is wearing thin. The boundary line is where I say it is. Before Abigail could respond, the sound of hoofbeats announced Declan's return. He pulled his horse to a halt when he saw the visitors, dismounting quickly and striding toward the house, his expression thunderous. Blackburn, he acknowledged coldly. To what do I owe this pleasure? Your housekeeper was just explaining that you know nothing about my missing boundary markers, Blackburn replied, emphasizing the word in a way that made its implication clear. Declan moved to stand beside Abigail. Whatever you've lost, it has nothing to do with me. Now, I'll thank you to leave my property and stop harassing my household. Blackburn's face reddened with anger. This isn't over, Oakley. That creek water belongs to the Double B, and I'll prove it. You do that, Declan replied evenly. In the meantime, get off my land. The men mounted their horses, Blackburn pausing to deliver a final warning. You'd be wise to reconsider my offer to buy this worthless patch of dirt, Oakley, before things get unpleasant. After they rode off, Declan turned to Abigail, concern etching his features. Are you all right? Did they threaten you? I'm fine, she assured him. Just shaken. What was that about boundary markers? Declan sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's an old dispute. My father and Blackburn argued about the property line for years. The deed clearly shows Cottonwood Creek as the eastern boundary, but Blackburn claims the line runs west of the creek, giving him exclusive water rights. And the missing markers, probably washed away in the flooding, Declan said with a shrug. Or more likely, his men moved them themselves to give him an excuse to make trouble. Abigail shivered despite the morning sun. He seems dangerous. Blackburn's all bluster, Declan assured her, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. He wants my land because it's the most direct route from his ranch to the railway station in Camp Verde. Without it, he has to drive his cattle an extra 10 miles around the mountains. What will you do? Declan's jaw set determinedly. Stand my ground. This ranch is all I have. The confrontation with Blackburn cemented Abigail's decision. That afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, she turned to Declan. I've been thinking about your offer, she began. He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. And I'll accept on one condition. Name it. Abigail took a deep breath. I want everything in writing. A legal document stating our partnership terms, my rights to the property, provisions for my child. She met his gaze steadily. I need to know my child and I will be secure, no matter what happens. A slow smile spread across Declan's face. You drive a hard bargain, Abigail Sullivan, but I wouldn't expect anything less. He extended his hand. Partners, then. She took his hand, surprised by the warmth that spread through her at his touch. Partners. The next day, they rode into Camp Verde together to visit the lawyer, Thomas Wheaton, a thin, scholarly man whose spectacles kept sliding down his nose. He listened with growing astonishment as Declan outlined their arrangement. Let me understand this correctly, Wheaton said, peering at them over his glasses. You wish to make Miss Sullivan an equal partner in your ranch. Not a wife, not an employee, but a business partner. That's right, Declan confirmed. Equal say in all decisions, equal share of profits and losses. Wheaton turned to Abigail. And you, Miss Sullivan, you understand what you're agreeing to. Running a ranch is difficult work, especially with a child. I understand perfectly, Abigail replied calmly. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Wheaton, the lawyer sighed. Very well. I'll draw up the partnership agreement, but I must advise you this is most unusual. People will talk. Let them, Declan and Abigail said in unison, then exchanged surprised looks that melted into smiles. As they left the lawyer's office, they almost collided with a well-dressed woman who was just entering the mercantile next door. She was perhaps 40, with carefully styled hair and an expression of perpetual disapproval. Mr. Oakley, she acknowledged, her gaze sliding curiously to Abigail. I didn't realize you were in town today. Mrs. Porter, Declan nodded politely. Just some business with Mr. Wheaton. This is Miss Abigail Sullivan, my new partner at the ranch. The woman's eyebrows shot up, her gaze lingering on Abigail's pregnancy. Partner, how progressive of you. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Porter, Abigail said with as much dignity as she could muster under the woman's scrutiny. Indeed, Mrs. Porter replied, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Well, I won't keep you. Good day." As she swept into the store, Declan sighed. Margaret Porter, widow of the former mayor and self-appointed guardian of Camp Verde's morals. By sundown, everyone in town will know about our arrangement. "Does that bother you?" Abigail asked quietly. Declan considered this, then shook his head. "No, does it bother you?" "I stopped caring what people think when I realized I was going to have a baby without a husband," she replied honestly. "All that matters now is providing for my child." "Our child," Declan corrected gently. "At least, that's how the town will see it now. Might make things easier for both of you." The implication wasn't lost on Abigail. In small frontier towns, illegitimacy carried a heavy stigma that could follow a child throughout life. If people assumed Declan was the father, it would shield her baby from that particular hardship. "I wouldn't ask you to claim a child that isn't yours," she said carefully. Declan helped her up into the wagon. "You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, it's nobody's business but ours what the truth is." As they drove back to the ranch, Abigail found herself studying Declan's profile against the afternoon sun. His kindness continued to surprise her. In her experience, men rarely did anything without expecting something in return, yet Declan seemed genuinely content with their business arrangement. The partnership agreement was finalized a week later. Mr. Wheaton rode out to the ranch with the documents, watching with barely concealed amazement as Abigail and Declan signed the papers, making them legal business partners. "It's done, then," Wheaton said, gathering the papers. "Congratulations to you both. I hope this unconventional arrangement works out." After he left, Declan turned to Abigail with a grin. "I believe this calls for a celebration. Miguel brought a bottle of whiskey last week as a thank you for the extra work I gave him. What do you say?" Abigail laughed. "I'd say you should enjoy it. I'll settle for a cup of tea, given my condition." As October gave way to November, their partnership began to take shape. Abigail took over the management of the household accounts, discovering a talent for bookkeeping that surprised them both. Under her careful eye, expenses were reduced and resources allocated more efficiently. Declan, freed from these concerns, focused on the cattle and expanding their small herd. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing meals and the evening hours, discussing plans for the ranch. Abigail found herself looking forward to these quiet moments, when Declan would share stories of his day or listen attentively to her ideas for improvements to the property. It was during one such evening, as they sat by the fireplace while rain pattered against the windows, that Abigail felt the first strong contractions. She gasped, dropping the mending in her lap, her hand flying to her belly. Declan was on his feet instantly. "What is it? Is it time?" "I think so," she managed, gritting her teeth against the pain. "But it's too early. The baby isn't due for another 3 weeks. Babies come when they're ready, not when we expect them," Declan said, surprisingly calm. "What do you need me to do?" "Send Miguel for the midwife in town," Abigail instructed, grateful for his steadiness. "Mrs. Larson, the storekeeper's wife, knows her." "Miguel left for his family's place after supper," Declan said, concern creeping into his voice. "The rain was letting up. I'll have to go myself." "No." Abigail clutched his arm as another contraction seized her. "The road will be washed out in places. It's too dangerous in the dark." "I can't just let you have this baby alone, Abigail." She took a deep breath as the pain subsided. "Women have been having babies without doctors or midwives for centuries. I'll manage." Declan looked torn. "At least let me get you to your bed. Then I'll heat water and find clean linens." With his support, Abigail made it to her small room off the kitchen. The contractions were coming faster now, each one more intense than the last. Declan brought water, towels, and clean sheets, his face a mask of concern. "I'll wait outside," he said awkwardly. "No." Abigail reached for his hand, surprising herself with the need for his presence. "Stay, please. I don't want to be alone." Hours passed in a blur of pain. Declan remained at her side, offering water, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. When the final, overwhelming urge to push came, he held her shoulders, supporting her as she brought her child into the world. The baby's cry filled the room, strong and indignant at being thrust from its warm sanctuary. Declan's face split into a wide grin. "It's a boy," he announced, carefully wrapping the infant in a clean towel as Abigail had instructed earlier. "A fine, strong boy." Tears streamed down Abigail's face as Declan placed her son in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face that was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." When she looked up, she found Declan watching them, his expression a mixture of awe and something deeper she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You did all the hard work," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "What will you name him?" Abigail looked down at her son, considering. "William," she decided. "After my father, William Thomas Sullivan." "It's a good name," Declan approved. "Strong like him." In the days that followed, Declan proved himself an unexpected ally in caring for the newborn. He fetched water for bathing, brought meals to Abigail's bedside, and even took turns walking with the fussy infant when Abigail needed rest. "You're good with him," she observed one evening, watching Declan pace the kitchen with William cradled against his shoulder, the baby's cries having subsided to contented coos. Declan smiled sheepishly. "I helped raise my younger brothers after my mother died." "Been a while, but some things you don't forget. Your brothers don't live nearby." "No." A shadow crossed his face. "James is in California working the goldfields. Michael joined the army. Last letter came from some fort in Dakota Territory. Father was hard on them, harder than he was on me. They left as soon as they could." Abigail recognized the loneliness in his voice. "You miss them." "Sometimes," he admitted, "but this is home. Never wanted to be anywhere else." As William grew stronger, Abigail gradually resumed her duties around the house, the baby often wrapped against her chest, or napping in a makeshift cradle Declan had constructed from an old crate. Winter settled over the Arizona Territory, bringing cool days and cold nights. The ranch work slowed with the season, giving Declan more time at the house. He took to joining Abigail and William by the fire in the evenings, sometimes reading aloud from one of the few books he owned, other times simply talking about plans for the spring. It was during one such evening in early December that the sound of approaching riders disrupted their peaceful routine. Declan rose, peering out the window into the darkness. His expression hardened. "Blackburn," he said grimly, "and at least 3 of his men." Abigail clutched William closer. "What do they want at this hour?" "Nothing good," Declan replied, moving to the cabinet where he kept his rifle. "Stay inside with William. Lock the door behind me." "Declan, do as I say, Abigail," he cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "Whatever happens, protect the baby." She nodded, fear clutching at her heart as Declan strode outside, rifle in hand. Through the window, she watched as he stood on the porch, the weapon visible but not raised as Blackburn and his men pulled up in the yard. "Kind of late for a social call, Blackburn," Declan called out, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. Blackburn dismounted, his men remaining on horseback. "Not a social call, Oakley. Business. I've come to make you one final offer for this property." "Not interested," Declan replied flatly. Same answer as the last time and the time before that. Circumstances have changed, Blackburn said, his tone ominous. I've acquired the mortgage on this property from the bank in Prescott. Abigail saw Declan stiffen. That's impossible. My father paid off that loan years ago. Did he? Blackburn produced a paper from his coat. Not according to this. There was an outstanding balance, small but legal. The bank was happy to sell the note to me. This is a trick, Declan growled. Whatever paper you're holding is a forgery. Blackburn shrugged. Take it up with the courts. In the meantime, you have 30 days to pay the balance in full $500 or I'll foreclose and take possession. $500. Abigail's mind raced. It was an enormous sum, especially in winter when the ranch generated little income. From the rigid set of Declan's shoulders, she knew they didn't have it. Get off my property, Blackburn, Declan said, raising the rifle slightly. Before I forget my manners. Blackburn mounted his horse, smirking. 30 days, Oakley, tick-tock. With a gesture to his men, he wheeled his horse around and rode off into the darkness. When Declan returned inside, his face was ashen. Did you hear? Abigail nodded, settling William in his cradle. Can he really do this? If the mortgage is legitimate, yes. Declan paced the room like a caged animal. But my father told me everything was paid off. There shouldn't be any outstanding loan. Could he have been mistaken? Or perhaps he took out another loan later. Possibly, Declan conceded, rubbing his jaw. Father was proud. If he needed money, he might not have told me. Abigail approached him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. What do we do now? Declan covered her hand with his own, the gesture unconscious but comforting. First, we verify if this claim is real. I'll ride to Prescott tomorrow, check with the bank. He took a deep breath. And if it is real, we find a way to raise $500 in 30 days. That night, after Declan retired to his room, Abigail sat by William's cradle, watching her son's peaceful slumber. In just a few short months, this ranch had become home. The thought of losing it, of Declan losing his family legacy, was unbearable. She had her savings, nearly $80 now, but it wasn't nearly enough. Declan left at dawn for Prescott, a journey that would take him 2 days each way. In his absence, Abigail threw herself into caring for the ranch with Miguel's help, all while turning over possibilities in her mind. There had to be a way to save their home. When Declan returned 4 days later, the grim set of his mouth told her everything before he spoke. The mortgage is real, he confirmed, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. Father took out a small loan 3 years before he died, never paid it off. With interest, it's grown to just over $500. And the bank sold it to Blackburn last month. They claim they sent notices, but I never received them. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Blackburn probably intercepted them. He's been planning this for a while. Abigail set a cup of coffee before him. We'll find a way, Declan. He looked up at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. This is my fight, Abigail, not yours. You and William shouldn't have to suffer for my family's problems. We're partners, she reminded him firmly. Your problems are my problems now. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn woman. Practical woman, she corrected. Now, let's think. We have some money saved from the fall cattle sale. How much? About $200, Declan said. Plus whatever you've been setting aside from the household accounts. Another 80, she confirmed. So we need just over 200 more in. She calculated quickly. 26 days. Declan shook his head. It's impossible. This time of year, there's no way to generate that kind of money. What about selling some cattle in winter for a fraction of their worth? Besides, we'd need to sell almost half the herd to raise that much. Abigail refused to be discouraged. Then we'll think of something else. What about your brothers? Could they help? Pain flickered across Declan's features. I haven't heard from Michael in over a year, and James." He shook his head. Last letter said he was barely making enough to feed himself. They sat in silence, the magnitude of their predicament settling over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, Abigail spoke. "We should go into town tomorrow. Maybe Mr. Wheaton has some legal advice. And we need supplies anyway." Declan nodded wearily. "First thing in the morning." The next day dawned clear and cold. They bundled William warmly and set out for Camp Verde, the three of them crowded on the wagon seat. To casual observers, they might have looked like any young family, and Abigail was surprised by how natural it felt to be beside Declan with the baby between them. Their first stop was Thomas Wheaton's office. The lawyer listened gravely to their situation, examining the copy of the mortgage note Declan had obtained in Prescott. "It appears legitimate," Wheaton confirmed reluctantly. "Blackburn has found a legal way to pressure you. There must be something we can do," Abigail insisted. "Some legal maneuver or delay tactic." Wheaton adjusted his spectacles. "I could file a petition claiming Blackburn acquired the note through deception, but without proof, it wouldn't get far, and it would only buy you a few extra weeks at most." "We need to raise the money," Declan concluded flatly. "Is there anyone in town who might loan it to us?" Wheaton hesitated. "The honest answer, no. Most folks around here are land rich but cash poor, especially this time of year, and those who do have money." He trailed off. "Would rather side with Blackburn than help us," Declan finished for him. As they left Wheaton's office, the weight of their situation pressing heavily upon them, Abigail noticed a poster tacked to the community board outside the general store. She stopped, reading it carefully. "Declan, look at this," she called, excitement creeping into her voice. "The Territorial Fair in Phoenix is hosting a competition next week. Grand prize is $300 for the best quarter horse." Declan studied the poster, a frown forming. "Abigail, we don't have time for horse races. Phoenix is a 4-day journey, and we'd need to leave immediately to make it in time." "But you have Thunderclap," she pressed. "You said yourself he's the fastest quarter horse in the territory." "He's fast, yes, but untested in competition, and he's barely saddle broken. I've been working with him, but he's still too wild for a formal race." Abigail's eyes lit with determination. "Then we have a week to finish his training." "Declan, this could be our answer." He studied her face, his expression softening at her enthusiasm. "It's a long shot." "Long shots are all we have right now," she replied. "Besides, what do we have to lose? A week of precious time we could be using to find another solution," he pointed out pragmatically. "And if we don't find one, at least this gives us a chance." She touched his arm impulsively. "I believe in you, and I believe in Thunderclap." Declan looked at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. Something shifted in his expression. "All right," he agreed. "But we do this together. I'll train Thunderclap and you'll help me with the strategy. Miguel can watch the ranch while we're gone." "We're going to Phoenix, all of us," Declan confirmed. "William included. We're partners, remember? Besides," he added with a crooked smile, "I might need your stubborn optimism if things get tough." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Declan spent every daylight hour working with Thunderclap, a magnificent black stallion with a white blaze on his forehead. The horse was spirited but intelligent, and under Declan's patient handling, he began to show promise as a racer. Abigail divided her time between caring for William, preparing for their journey, and watching Declan's training sessions. In the evenings, they would discuss strategy, plotting the best approach for the race based on Thunderclap's strengths. The night before their departure, as they sat at the kitchen table finalizing their plans, Declan looked up suddenly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For believing this is possible. For not giving up on the ranch, on me." Abigail smiled softly. "That's what partners do." His gaze held hers for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then William fussed in his cradle, breaking the moment. Abigail rose to tend to him, but not before she caught the look of quiet longing on Declan's face. They set out at dawn the next morning, Thunderclap tethered behind the wagon. The journey to Phoenix would take them through rugged terrain, but the weather was favorable, and they made good progress. William proved to be an excellent traveler, content to sleep in his makeshift bed in the wagon or be carried in the sling Abigail had fashioned. At night, they camped under the stars, taking turns keeping watch while the other slept. On the third evening, as they sat before a small fire, William sleeping peacefully nearby, Declan broke a companionable silence. "Why did you really come to Camp Verde, Abigail, out of all the places you could have gone?" She considered the question, watching the flames dance. "I had heard there was work to be found, and it was far enough from Missouri that no one would know me or my circumstances." "You never speak of the baby's father," Declan observed carefully. Abigail stiffened slightly. "There's not much to tell. He was passing through our town, a cattle buyer from Texas. Charming, with pretty words and promises he never intended to keep." She wrapped her arms around herself. "When I wrote to tell him about the baby, the letter came back. He'd given me a false name, a false address. Everything about him was a lie." Anger flashed across Declan's features. "He deserves a bullet for abandoning you like that." "Perhaps," Abigail acknowledged, "but then I wouldn't have ended up at Oakley Ranch." She offered him a small smile. "Sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes." Declan reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you found your way to my door." They arrived in Phoenix late on the fourth day, the city sprawling before them in the fading light. It was larger than Camp Verde, with proper streets and substantial buildings. The territorial fair was already underway, the outskirts of town dotted with tents and temporary structures. They found modest accommodations at a boarding house run by a stern-faced woman who eyed Abigail and the baby with suspicion, until Declan smoothly introduced them as "my wife and son." The lie came so easily, so naturally, that Abigail found herself blushing at the implication. The race was scheduled for the following afternoon. In the morning, Declan took Thunderclap to the fairgrounds to register and familiarize the horse with the track. Abigail and William joined him later, finding the fairgrounds teeming with visitors from all over the territory. "How many competitors?" Abigail asked, spotting Declan near the corral where Thunderclap was being held. 12, he replied grimly. "Some good horses, experienced riders. The favorite is a stallion from a ranch near Tucson. Won 3 races this year already." Abigail studied the competition, then turned back to Declan with a determined smile. "They haven't seen Thunderclap run." The hours before the race passed with agonizing slowness. Declan checked and rechecked Thunderclap's tack, speaking soothingly to the horse who seemed to sense the importance of the occasion. Abigail found a spot near the finish line, William secure in her arms, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. When the competitors lined up at the starting line, Declan and Thunderclap among them, Abigail held her breath. Declan sat tall in the saddle, his face a mask of concentration. He caught her eye briefly and nodded, a silent communication of shared purpose. The starting pistol cracked, and the horses surged forward. Thunderclap broke cleanly from the line, settling into the middle of the pack as they rounded the first turn. Declan held him back, just as they had planned, saving the horse's energy for the final stretch. As they approached the halfway point, Thunderclap began to move up, picking off competitors one by one. By the final turn, he was in third position, gaining on the leaders. Abigail clutched William tighter, whispering encouragement as if Declan could somehow hear her. In the final straightaway, Declan gave Thunderclap his head. The black stallion responded magnificently, surging forward with powerful strides. The crowd roared as he drew even with the leader, then inched ahead. They crossed the finish line a half-length in front, Thunderclap's victory secure. Abigail let out a cry of joy, tears streaming down her face as she pushed through the crowd toward the winner's circle. Declan dismounted, his face split with a grin wider than she had ever seen. When he spotted her, he strode forward, and before she realized his intent, he had swept her and William into a fierce embrace. "We did it," he murmured against her hair. "You were right." The prize money was presented with much ceremony, the territorial governor himself handing over the purse of $300. There were offers to buy Thunderclap on the spot, one gentleman offering $1,000 for the champion stallion. "Not for sale at any price," Declan told them firmly. "This horse is part of our family." They spent one more night in Phoenix, celebrating their victory with a proper dinner at the hotel restaurant. William slept peacefully in a borrowed cradle beside their table as they talked late into the evening, the future suddenly brighter than it had been in weeks. "With the prize money and what we've saved, we have more than enough to pay off Blackburn," Abigail calculated. "We'll even have some left over for improvements to the ranch," Declan nodded. "That new well we've been talking about, maybe even expanding the herd come spring. Blackburn's face when we pay him off will be worth the trip alone," Abigail said with a mischievous smile. Declan studied her across the table, his expression growing serious. "You know, I've been thinking about our partnership." Abigail's smile faltered. "Oh, it's working well, the business arrangement, but I'm wondering if perhaps we should consider—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically unsure of himself. "Consider what?" Abigail prompted, her heart suddenly racing. "A more permanent arrangement," he finished, meeting her gaze directly. "Abigail, these past months with you and William at the ranch, it's felt right in a way nothing has before. I know our partnership began as a practical solution, but my feelings for you have become anything but practical." She stared at him, speechless. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," Declan continued quickly. "Just asking you to think about it, about us. As a real family, not just business partners." Abigail found her voice at last. "Declan, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," he urged gently. "That's all I'm asking for now." The journey back to Camp Verde gave Abigail ample time to consider Declan's words. They traveled mostly in companionable silence, the triumph of their victory and the promise of saving the ranch creating a bubble of contentment around them. But beneath the surface, Abigail's thoughts were in turmoil. Did she love Declan Oakley? The question haunted her waking hours. She admired him, respected him, enjoyed his company. He was kind to her son, treated her as an equal, and had shown her nothing but respect from the moment they met. But love, that was something else entirely. Her experience with love had left her wary and wounded. The pretty lies of William's father had taught her to be cautious with her heart. And yet, when she thought of Declan, his quiet strength, his integrity, the way his rare smiles transformed his serious face, something warm unfurled within her chest. They arrived back at the ranch to find everything in order, Miguel having kept a watchful eye on the property in their absence. The young man's face lit up when Declan told him about Thunderclap's victory, and he insisted on examining the stallion himself to ensure he had suffered no ill effects from the journey. "We'll ride to the bank in Prescott tomorrow," Declan told Abigail as they settled back into the house. "Pay off that mortgage and be done with Blackburn once and for all." The trip to Prescott was triumphant. The bank manager's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline when Declan counted out $500 in cash, requesting a receipt showing the mortgage paid in full. With the document secured in Declan's pocket, they rode directly to the Double B Ranch. Lawrence Blackburn was in his study when they were announced, his surprise at their visit quickly masked by a smug smile. "Oakley, come to negotiate terms of surrender, have you?" "Not exactly," Declan replied, stepping aside so Abigail could enter the room behind him. "We've come to settle accounts." Blackburn's gaze moved to Abigail, his expression dismissive. "This doesn't concern your housekeeper." "Partner," Declan corrected. "In all things. And this very much concerns both of us." He removed the bank receipt from his pocket, laying it on Blackburn's desk. "The mortgage is paid in full. Your scheme failed." Blackburn snatched up the paper, his face darkening as he read. "Where did you get this kind of money?" "Honestly," Abigail replied sweetly. "Unlike some people." Fury flashed across Blackburn's features, quickly controlled. "This changes nothing. That worthless patch of land will be mine eventually, one way or another." "No, it won't," Declan said with quiet certainty. "And if you or your men set foot on our property again without invitation, you'll regret it." As they rode away from the Double B, Abigail felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Do you think he'll cause more trouble?" "Probably," Declan admitted. "But we've won this round decisively. He'll lick his wounds for a while before trying again." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, William asleep in Abigail's arms, a sense of contentment settled over them. The ranch was secure, at least for now. Their partnership had proven successful beyond either of their expectations. "I've been thinking about what you said in Phoenix," Abigail began, her voice soft in the gathering dusk. Declan turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. "And I'm afraid," she admitted. "The last time I trusted a man with my heart, he left me with nothing but broken promises and shame." "I'm not him," Declan said simply. "I know that," Abigail replied. "In my head I know that, but my heart is slower to trust." Declan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I can wait, Abigail. However long it takes." She studied him in the fading light, this man who had offered her sanctuary when she needed it most, who had become not just her partner but her friend. "I don't want to wait," she decided suddenly. "Life is too uncertain, too precious to waste time on fear." Declan's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying yes," Abigail said softly. "To us, to a family, to whatever the future holds as long as we face it together." The smile that broke across Declan's face was like sunrise after a long night. He moved closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "May I kiss you? I've been wanting to for longer than I care to admit." In answer, Abigail leaned forward, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they parted, William stirred between them, blinking up at them with curious eyes. Declan chuckled, reaching out to stroke the baby's soft cheek. "What do you say, little man? Would you like me to be your pa?" As if in answer, William grabbed Declan's finger in his tiny fist, holding on with surprising strength. "I think that's a yes," Abigail laughed, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Camp Verde church, Miguel serving as witness. The town buzzed with gossip about the speed of the wedding and the circumstances of their partnership, but standing beside Declan as she spoke her vows, Abigail found she didn't care about whispers and speculation. This was their life, their family, their choice. Spring came early to the Arizona Territory that year. The land greened with promise, and the cattle grew fat on fresh grass. Under Declan and Abigail's joint management, Oakley Ranch began to thrive as never before. William took his first steps on the porch where Declan had first offered Abigail partnership, toddling unsteadily from his mother's arms to his adoptive father's waiting hands. Watching them together, Abigail marveled at the strange path that had led her to this moment of pure joy. In the summer, they hosted a celebration at the ranch, part housewarming, part delayed wedding reception. The residents of Camp Verde arrived in wagons and on horseback, curiosity overcoming any reservations about the unconventional couple. By the end of the evening, even Margaret Porter had been won over, cooing over William and complimenting Abigail on the improvements to the property. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and crimsons once more, Abigail made a discovery that filled her with equal parts joy and trepidation. She waited until evening after William was asleep to share the news with Declan. "I'm with child," she told him simply, watching his face for his reaction. "Due in the spring." For a moment, Declan simply stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." "You're happy then?" she asked, pulling back to search his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Declan assured her. "Ecstatic." Overjoyed, terrified, Abigail laughed. "Terrified? What if I'm not good at this?" he asked, suddenly serious. "Being a father from the beginning, I mean." "William came with instructions," he joked, referring to Abigail's confident mothering. "You'll be wonderful," she assured him. "You already are." The following March, as wildflowers began to carpet the valley, Abigail gave birth to a healthy boy they named Robert Declan Oakley. Unlike William's hasty arrival, Robert's birth was attended by Mrs. Larson, the midwife from Camp Verde, with Declan pacing anxiously outside until he was called in to meet his son. "He has your eyes," Abigail whispered as Declan cradled the newborn with reverent hands. "And your determination," Declan replied, noting the strong grip of the baby's tiny fingers around his own. "Two boys. We're outnumbered now." "For the moment," Abigail said with a smile, "but the future is wide open." In the years that followed, Oakley Ranch grew and prospered. Thunderclap's reputation as a champion quarter horse attracted breeders from across the territory, adding a new revenue stream to their cattle operation. Declan and Miguel expanded the herd, while Abigail's garden supplied fresh produce not only for their table but for sale in Camp Verde. William grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who shadowed Declan's every move, learning the ways of the ranch from his adoptive father. Robert, more rambunctious and outgoing, became Abigail's helper, his curious nature and quick mind making him eager to learn everything about the world around him. In the spring of 1887, their family expanded again with the birth of a daughter, Emma Grace. Declan, who had proven to be a natural and devoted father, was completely besotted with his little girl, declaring her the most beautiful thing I've ever seen as he held her for the first time. Lawrence Blackburn remained a presence in their lives, though his attempts to acquire the Oakley Ranch grew less frequent and more half-hearted as the years passed. When news came that he had suffered a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed, Abigail surprised Declan by suggesting they pay a visit. "Why would we do that?" Declan asked, bewildered. "After everything he tried to do to us." "Because holding on to bitterness serves no purpose," Abigail replied gently, "and because it's the right thing to do." They found Blackburn a shadow of his former self, confined to a wheelchair, his once imposing presence diminished by illness. His surprise at their visit was evident, as was his suspicion of their motives. "Come to gloat?" he asked weakly. "No," Abigail said, stepping forward with Emma in her arms. "We came to offer our sympathy and to introduce you to our daughter." Something shifted in Blackburn's expression as he gazed at the child, regret, perhaps, or the recognition of his own mortality. "She's beautiful," he acknowledged gruffly. Before they left, Declan extended an olive branch. "The property dispute between our families has gone on long enough," he said. "Let's end it. We'll respect your boundaries if you'll respect ours." Blackburn studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture of acceptance if not quite reconciliation. On the 10th anniversary of Abigail's arrival at Oakley Ranch, they hosted a grand celebration. Friends and neighbors from miles around gathered to commemorate not just their decade of marriage but the success of their partnership. The ranch had tripled in size. Their herd was the healthiest in the territory, and their breeding program had gained national recognition. As twilight settled over the celebration, Declan found Abigail watching their children play with the other youngsters. William, now a lanky 10-year-old, was showing Robert how to twirl a lasso. Emma tottered after them, determined not to be left out. "Happy?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Beyond measure," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Did you ever imagine that day I showed up on your doorstep that we'd end up here?" Declan considered this. "I knew you were special from the moment I saw you, didn't know how special until later." Abigail turned in his arms, studying the face she had come to love so deeply. The years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but he was still the same steadfast man who had offered her not just employment but a future when she needed it most. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For offering partnership instead of just a job, for seeing me as a person with value, not just a desperate woman in trouble, for loving William as your own." She reached up to touch his cheek. "For loving me." Declan captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Best decision I ever made. Though I have to admit, when I suggested partnership, I wasn't thinking quite as far ahead as this." "No," Abigail teased. "So it wasn't a calculated plan to get a wife, 3 children, and someone to make your breakfast every morning?" "Maybe subconsciously," he laughed, then grew serious. "I just knew I couldn't let you walk away. The house felt like a home for the first time since my mother died. You brought life back to this place, Abigail. To me." As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, their guests began to depart, calling out congratulations and good wishes. When the last wagon had rolled away, Declan and Abigail gathered their tired children and headed toward the house that had become the heart of their expanding world. William ran ahead, holding his little sister's hand as she toddled alongside him. Robert lingered behind with his parents, full of questions as always. "Papa, is it true what Mr. Rodriguez said? That you weren't always William's father?" Declan exchanged a glance with Abigail before answering carefully. "William was born before your mother and I met. But being a father isn't just about whose blood runs in your veins. It's about who raises you, teaches you, loves you. In all the ways that matter, I've always been William's father, just as I'm yours and Emma's." Robert considered this, then nodded, satisfied. "That's what I thought." He ran ahead to join his siblings, leaving Declan and Abigail alone. "You handled that well," Abigail observed. "I've had practice," Declan replied with a smile. "And I meant every word. You and the children, you're everything to me, my family, my heart." Standing in the yard of the ranch they had built together, under a canopy of stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to partners to lovers, Abigail Sullivan Oakley thanked whatever twist of fate had led her to this place, this man, this life that had surpassed her wildest dreams. "My heart," she echoed, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as their children called for them from the porch. "Always."